Hello everyone and welcome to my Skellige card review. This will be my first video for YouTube. I will be reviewing all of the new cards from the upcoming Gwent set, and I'm deciding to do it by faction so I could talk about each card in the broader context of the set, not just doing it one by one, maybe leaving out potential synergies and stuff. It's better to get the full picture of everything that's going on. So, as we start off with Skellige, we could start with Bone Talisman because it actually overlaps with several other cards in the set. It allows you to either resurrect a bronze beast or heal an ally and strengthen it by 3. This has synergy with several different cards in the new set, chiefly Beastmaster, that is just a 1 strength unit that spawns a bear, as well as Clan Corsair. Now, it doesn't necessarily have synergy with this card, but it's similar design in that it is another resurrection spell or resurrection creature that targets a specific type of unit, which is interesting in the faction that already has Priestess of Freya. So either they think that the upside, the 2 points on this one and the alternate mode on Bone Talisman, justify the choice between these and Priestess of Freya, or Priestess of Freya is changing. So one of those two things is likely to happen. In either case, I do think it's interesting that we now have specialized resurrection units with upside. This Bone Talisman, if you were playing a deck where the cards you were planning to res anyway are the flipped side of Raging Berserker or the bear off Beastmaster, then Bone Talisman is generally going to be better than Freya because of the alternate mode and the fact that you can potentially tutor it off of Clan Protector that allows you to play a bronze item from your deck. Worth noting, this is not random. You could actually have a toolbox of items in your deck with Clan Protector, so you don't necessarily need to play all Bone Talismans. You could play Bone Talisman, and there's a few other utility items that we could get to later in neutral that do a wide array of things. So this is a good toolbox card that synergizes with this, and as you can see already, a lot of these cards work well with each other. Specifically, these 3 actually build up a critical mass for a potential Stregobor deck. Now, we could actually scroll up really quick to talk about Stregobor because it does synergize well with Skellige. He is a 10 strength mage that if both players have not yet passed, you both draw a unit and set its strength to 1. Obviously, you would want to have it so you're likely to draw a unit that doesn't care about its size, so you give your opponent something tiny and you have something you can fully utilize. Now, if you are building a Skellige deck that has this, like Freya, or another small unit as your whole bronze base, then you pretty much have a one-sided Stregobor. So that's the core you could potentially build with these cards. Moving on to Clan Corsair in more depth, resurrecting a bronze machine, we've already seen Whale Harpooner used a lot in competitive play. You could argue it's the best Skellige bronze right now, and we are also getting the addition of Warship, which is also very good. This is just kind of an upgrade on Brockvar Hunter. It's 1 damage 4 times instead of 3, and also you could pump 4 damage into one thing, 2 damage into 2 things. You could split this any way you want, which is a big deal. This thing can set up Scorch and Igni exceptionally well. It's 4 triggers for Axeman or Duran. So this card is going to, I anticipate, see a lot of play, even if Axeman specifically isn't an archetype, because even in like the self-wounding decks, like, it's just weird that this card is just way better than Archer. Maybe Archer changed too, but this card's very, very good. So obviously going along with Duran, whenever an enemy unit is damaged with this is my 1 is to pump him by 4. And now that we have Duran, you could potentially see an Axeman deck being built because of you have so many ways to recur this with Sigdrifa, Restore, and potentially getting another copy off of Strigbog Runestone. So you could have a Axeman deck with your 3 Axemen and then Duran as the centerpiece and kind of recur Duran a lot. Well, even though you ostensibly have one copy of this, you could just like play it a lot. He's also cursed, so he can be fetched by Hym, which is pretty important. So there's a lot of overlapping synergies throughout all of these cards that I really like. They're like, each card works well with like 2 other archetypes, so we're going to see a lot of creativity moving forward in the new set, which is going to be dope. There's not like cookie cutter force stuff. Like, this can go in a bunch of different things. This can go in a bunch of different things. This, like, All of these cards have overlap between various factions, so it's going to be interesting to see how people decide to incorporate these into existing decks. Now, I want to take this opportunity before we get to Clan Marauder and Clan Smuggler to talk about Ornamental Sword and Stribog Runestone, the two Discover cards in Skellige. Now, every faction has a Runestone that lets them discover a silver, and most factions have some variant on Ornamental Sword. Now, I like the design of Ornamental Sword because on a Discover you want the pool to be pretty confined. You don't want there to be a huge ceiling and a low floor, and generally Skellige soldiers are going to be close together, or at least I thought. I actually went through it and looked at all of the potential hits, and because Skellige is such a synergy driven faction, there are a lot of dead hits on this card. You can hit Queensguard, a deck without Queensguard. You can hit Raider. You can get Shield Maiden, which is obviously bad when you don't have the other ones. You can hit Raging Berserker, which strengthening the Raging Berserker is not very good. It's not really a dead hit, but it's certainly suboptimal. Clan Smuggler is another card that if you don't have synergy with it is obviously worse. And even on the high end, I guess the best hit with this is Jangfret, and then behind that is Lugos potentially, or Judah. So the ceiling on this card actually isn't that high, and the floor is pretty low. Obviously, you're seeing 3 separate cards, so you're likely not to get all 3 blanks. But I don't know if this card is going to be good enough for competitive play just because of on average how bad it is. Granted, if you're playing a deck that really relies on seeing Lugos, if you're playing Axeman, then maybe you're fine. A Shield Maiden might be okay, or you can maybe have ways to use the bad hits or make it so on average you're getting something reasonable. So there are deck building costs to this card, but it's worse than I originally thought it was, even though I do like the design. Similarly with Stribog Runestone, you have really good silvers in Skellige. You have Restore, Sigdrifa, Gremis, but you also have a lot of heavily synergy-based silvers. So unless you are looking for specific additional copies of things like Duran in an Axeman deck or things similar to that, this card may or may not be useful. Granted, it could always find another spy, which is nonsense. They really need to change this to create a loyal Skellige silver card. One of the biggest problems Gwent has encountered in the past is cards that make additional spies. They had to nerf Summoning Circle for that reason. So I hope that changes with this, because then you're kind of obligated to run this just to high roll a spy every once in a while, and that's pretty toxic. So the way these two cards are currently situated, they're obviously very RNG heavy, and it doesn't seem like the average case is good enough, although on Stribog Runestone it probably is, just because the ceiling is spy. But Ornamental Sword I don't expect to see much play. A side note on Create, what I would like to see on these cards is some way to have the card go to your hand. So in this this Create mechanic obviously has a lot of comparisons to draw with the Discover mechanic in Hearthstone, which is seen to be a pretty successful mechanic. It's very healthy for gameplay because it's an example of RNG that you have agency over. You get to play some card that creates something, put it in your hand, and then get to play the game to a point to leverage that card. In Gwent, it's different because whatever you pick off these gets played immediately. There's no time to plan. You just see your 3 options. You have to be okay, this is the best one. I guess I'll play this. It would be interesting if, for example, these cards had some ability that allowed them to imprint on another card. For example, you would choose to play Ornamental Sword. You would play another card in your hand, and it would transform Ornamental Sword into whatever card you choose to take. So you would have that card in your hand later to be able to leverage however you want, which would kind of mitigate the RNG instead of just having to play it immediately and you still play the card normally and stuff. This is an idea, because that is certainly one of the chief weaknesses of Create right now, is the fact they have to play it. It just makes the cards very reliant on the dice roll, and they don't necessarily need to be. So a little aside on Create, but just on a power level basis, Ornamental Sword probably not, Runestone probably. But again, we'll see how things go. Now, Clan Marauder. Clan Marauder is actually a really cool card. I just like the design space of this, where it does something initially, and then you resurrect it, and it gets better. I don't know if this card is going to be good enough just on its face. It's an 11 initially, dealing 4 damage, which may or may not be a relevant number. If it is, then this card will probably be good. If it's not, it won't be. And then deal 6 damage later. The resurrected side of this, 13, pretty good. I just like the design of this with Skellige. It's the numbers on this card are going to determine whether or not it's playable, like how often 4 damage matters, how often 6 damage matters in round 3 or round 2. So we'll have to see how that ends up. Because this goes a fundamentally reactive card, its power level is going to be determined by what other people are doing. So we'll see how that pans out. But I would love to see more cards like this that do one thing when you first play them, and then if you resurrect, there's like a kicker. Like it does the same thing plus whatever. I like that design space a lot, and I hope they explore that more in the future. Now we have Clan Smuggler. Clan Smuggler is an interesting unit. Return a bronze unit from your graveyard to your deck. Now there's some like obvious synergy with Clan Ancrate Raider. You can play Clan Smuggler alongside Warmongers and Raiders and keep resurrecting Warmongers and having Raiders to discard with the Warmongers. That's like the level 1 of this card. Other things are you could put things back in your deck that you would want to replay. The weird thing in Skellige, though, is you have ways to get things from your graveyard. You don't necessarily have ways to get them from your deck. So usually the only real application I can see for this guy is with Raider and Warmonger. I don't really see much application for him tutoring for things because it's kind of backwards. Like you want to do it the other way. You want to get things from your graveyard or deck into your graveyard, not your graveyard into your deck. Skellige's good at rezzing things. It's not really good at tutoring things. So this card's interesting. You could definitely abuse it with Raiders, but I'm not really sure what kind of use it's going to see outside of that. Now we can get to some other silvers. Joanna is definitely worth talking about because this card is very powerful. Heal a bronze or silver unit, then boost it by the amount healed. This is a very juiced up Armorsmith. Obviously only hits 1 target, but the boost essentially makes it hit 2 because whatever was healed, it like resurrects or boosts, sorry. So you could essentially, like for example, use this on Olaf. If you just play Olaf naked as a 10 with 10 missing health, you would then play this, recuperate the rest, like make it a 30. That seems decent. It's interesting if when this is actually going to be better than Armorsmith. Whenever you have one unit that's damaged a lot is the answer. The question is how often is that going to be that's worth taking up a silver slot? Because when you think about it, like say for example you have 2 things damaged by 4. If you just use Joanna on one of them, it's the same as using an Armorsmith, but you spent a silver. So I do think Joanna is very good. There are applications where it is going to be better than Armorsmith, but it does expose you to things like Coral, Scorch, Igni, and is not really that much better than Armorsmith. So I'm a little bit skeptical of it after thinking about it. I initially thought it was very good, but we'll have to see how competitive silver slots are, and if you really want to have this, how much you're damaging your own things, because I don't think this card is good enough to play when you're just counting on your opponent to damage stuff in a reactive manner. If you're damaging your own things a lot, then you probably want multiple Armorsmith effects, and if you want multiple Armorsmith effects, it's probably worth spending the silver slot on this. If you're not, then it's not. So depending upon how you want to build your deck, Joanna could be good, but I don't think you want to play it as an Armorsmith. I think you need to be doing more than that. And then we have the Meme Pig. The Meme Pig's great. Giant Boar, destroy a random ally, then boost self by 10. So obviously the dream is to hit something like Beastmaster or Freya or Clan Protector and have this be like +9 or 8. That would be awesome, but it's unclear how often that's going to happen because, like, for Beastmaster, it's making a bear that would be bad to kill. For Freya, it's presumably resurrecting something big. So unclear how often you're going to have, like, good odds on this giant boar. It's just a big old random card. But it's fun. I like it. I don't know how competitive it is, but I like the boar. It's pretty funny. That's all I have to say about this card. And now we get to move on to my favorite card in the set, probably, which is Hym. This is essentially fixed Rainfarn. Although I do think Rainfarn should be knocked down to 2. If we decide Hym is 2, Rainfarn should be 2. Or if we decide Rainfarn's 5, Hym should be 5. Like, they should be the same thing. Either way. But his abilities are you can choose between either playing a cursed unit from your deck or spawn a silver unit from your opponent's deck. The spawn silver unit from your opponent's deck is kind of like a fail state for this card in case you like already drew all your cursed units. But the main thing is he's going to allow you to tutor a cursed unit from your deck. Obviously, this is very strong with Ulderic, so you get access to your spy on a more consistent basis, which is very important. If you're playing an Axeman deck, you can tutor for Duran. If you're playing a Cursed Skellige deck, you can get important cards like Wilfred Skull Guy, whose name I'm forgetting. But just having a tutor in Skellige to improve this faction's consistency, alongside the printing of Reconnaissance, which is going to improve every faction's consistency, this is a big deal because Skellige traditionally didn't have a lot of ways to be consistent unless you were playing Warmonger Raider, and now you have just a straight-up tutor in your deck for most things that you would find important. So this is a really good card. It's really important for Skellige. This is going to be like kind of auto-include in most Skellige decks, I would imagine. Even like if you're not cursed, you would still be probably playing Ulderic. And even if you draw your Ulderic, you again have the fail state of just spawning a silver unit from your opponent's deck. So even if your only tutor target is Ulderic in your deck, you can still run this card because of the second mode. So we will be seeing a lot of Hym. Also, it just looks cool. I can't wait to see the pre-move of this card. So Hym's great. And then we have Ufadin. Ufadin's a wild name. 8 Strength Wolf deals 2 damage to each damaged enemy. Now, the ceiling on this card is really high. I don't know how often you're going to be able to get that. This card synergizes well with Yennefer, Stammelford's Tremors, this boat, Brockfur Hunter. There's a lot of things you could use to help enable this guy, and the ceiling is definitely very high during a long round. I'm not sure how often you would get there. You would need to kind of build up to it. You could definitely play this in some kind of Axeman deck, but it's interesting in that shell that you'd already be good in the long round, presumably. Like, you wouldn't really need this. Although I guess the Axeman decks wouldn't really be played with weather, so at the end of the round, maybe you would kind of like this as a finisher. Your opponent needs to be going wide. They need to have a fair amount of units. They also need to have a fair amount of units with like 3 or 4 more strength, because they need to be damaged by something and then be around to get damaged by 2 more and have that matter. I don't know how many decks fit that bill. Granted, in a long round, every deck's going to have like about 10 units in play, so maybe you could leverage that. It's a really cool unit. I like the flavor of it. The art seems cool. We'll have to see how easy it is to enable, what decks might want it, but the power, like, it's on a raw power level basis, this card's good enough. If you can enable it, it's going to be like way more than 20 points. So you can definitely use this card if you're able to enable it. It's just hard to tell right now how easy it's going to be to enable. And then last but certainly not least, we have Olaf. Olaf is a 20-point cursed bear that, when he enters the battlefield, deals 10 damage to itself, but the damage is reduced by 2 for each beast you have played in this match. Now, interesting, this says beast you have played. This says spawn a bear. I have to imagine that's just an oversight, because it would be super duper weird that if the only bear in the set where this is printed didn't synergize with it, so that'd be super weird. So I'm just going to assume for a moment that this works with this, even though the wording would suggest it does not. So you would need to play 5 bears to fully offset the downside of Olaf. That's not a huge deal. Now, the bears, or beasts rather, I mean, they're all going to be bears, but the beasts that exist in Skellige currently are Raging Berserker, Savage Bear, and that's it. At least, unless I miss something, it's Raging Berserker and Savage Bear. So you need those, and then Beastmaster, and then you need to play 5 of those. You'll probably get most of the way there. Obviously, Raging Berserker plus Haymade Battle Maiden, pulling them out will get you most of the way there. And you could also potentially not even enable this all the way. you could potentially, like I said before, play this with Joanna. You could play it even with just Bone Talisman, heal it and strengthen it by 3, and then like renew it later. Does he count it? I wonder if he counts himself. Like, if you play Olaf, does he count for the renewed Olaf later? Interesting. He might. The way it's worded, he would. But unclear. In any case, that's something you could do. So, you could potentially, like, strengthen him up later, resurrect him with renew, stuff like that. He's just a big body. Again, it would depend upon how much people are punishing that, because this is vulnerable to Scorch, it's vulnerable to Igni. So depending upon how much of that kind of stuff people are playing, this card might not be great, but on a just raw power level basis, it seems good. And there definitely seems to be enough support for it. Even if you're not playing bears, there's just a bunch of stuff in Skellige that heals damage. Like, you really don't need to try too hard to enable this. And you could even, for example, like, get this to 18 and then, like, Warcrier it or something. So there's a lot of ways to play with Olaf. You're not really locked into one specific strategy, which is kind of a common theme among all of these Skellige cards, which I really like. Just the design of this set in general that allows a lot of overlap between themes is kind of something I've been advocating for a while, where you want, like, packages of synergies that can intermingle with one another, because it just makes deck building more interesting. Like, it doesn't make it so it's an objectively best thing. You can kind of mix and match stuff and do whatever you want. So I think that concludes my review for Skellige. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was my first foray into YouTube. We're going to be doing this for the other factions as well. I will be putting those videos up in the coming days. Thank you very much for watching this. If you want to see me testing these new decks as they come out later, you can check me out at twitch.tv/TrudonFM. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching.